Poor mum pretends she doesn't like sweets, so her daughter can eat everything. A billionaire overhears their conversation and does something incredible. The street was quiet at that time of the afternoon. The sun was beginning to set, painting the storefronts orangey, and the smell of fresh bread escaped through the bakery door like an invitation impossible to ignore. Laura stopped in front of the window and felt her stomach clench. Not hers. Hers had already learned to wait, but Sophie was by her side, holding her hand with that blind trust only a child has, and that was enough to make any hunger worthwhile. She stuck her hand in the pocket of her worn-out coat and pulled out the coins. She counted slowly, one by one, with trembling fingers. $3.40. It was all that was left until the end of the week. Sophie looked through the glass with wide eyes, blue as a summer sky. Her blonde hair fell messily over her shoulders, and she pressed her lips together as if she were choosing which toy to ask for at Christmas. "Look, Mummy, that one has pink frosting." Laura followed her daughter's small finger, a plump cupcake with strawberry frosting and colorful sprinkles. It looked too expensive. It looked like something for people who didn't need to count coins in their pockets. But Sophie deserved it. She always deserved it. "Let's go in, my love." The little bell on the door jingled as they entered. The warmth of the bakery embraced them both like an old blanket. The smell of butter, sugar, flour. Laura took a deep breath and tried not to think about how long it had been since she had last eaten something warm. The attendant smiled. She was a young woman with a white apron and a friendly face. "Good afternoon, what can I get for you?" Laura looked at Sophie, who was already on her tiptoes trying to get a better view of the display case. "One cupcake, please. The strawberry one. Just one?" "Just one." The woman carefully picked up the sweet, placed it in a small box and handed it over the counter. Laura paid, put the remaining coins back in her pocket, 70 cents, and left with Sophie holding her hand. Across the street, there were some wooden benches near a small square. Laura sat down and pulled her daughter onto her lap. She opened the little box slowly, like someone opening a present. "Look at that. Isn't it beautiful?" Sophie's eyes widened, and she let out a small squeal of joy. She picked up the cupcake with both hands and stared at it as if it were a treasure. "Eat it, my love." Sophie took the first bite, her eyes shining, but she soon stopped, held the cupcake in the air, and looked at her mother with the face of someone who had just remembered something important. "Mommy, have a piece." Laura felt her chest tighten. She looked at the sweet in her daughter's hand, so colorful and tempting, and then at her anxious little face. "I don't like sweets." Sophie frowned, suspicious. "How can you not like them? You always say you love them." Laura forced a smile, the kind of smile every mother learns to make when she has to lie for her children's sake. "You can eat it all, my love. It's yours. Enjoy it." The lie came out too easily. Laura had plenty of practice. Sophie shrugged and bit into the cupcake with gusto. The frosting stuck to the corner of her mouth, and she licked her fingers, satisfied. Laura watched her, feeling her chest tighten and release at the same time. Seeing her daughter happy was the only thing that still made sense. Across the square, sitting alone at a small iron table, Jack Harrison held a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. He hadn't come to the bakery by chance. He came every day, at the same time, because it was the only place where he could get out of his own head for a few minutes. But on that day, he wasn't thinking about anything. He was just watching. Watching that blonde woman in the old coat, sitting on the bench with her daughter on her lap. Watching the way she smiled while the little girl ate. Watching the way she didn't take even a small piece of the sweet. He knew that gesture. He knew it because he had seen it his whole life. His mother used to do it. She would say she wasn't hungry. She would say she had already eaten. She would say she preferred to save it for later. But Jack knew. He always knew. She was lying so that he could eat. He was 8 years old when he finally understood. He was sitting at the table with a plate of pasta in front of him, and she was standing washing dishes. He asked her why she didn't sit down to eat too. "I already ate, dear, but the stove was clean, the pot empty." And she had that tired look, a look he only understood years later, when it was too late to thank her. Jack blinked, returning to the present. The girl was laughing, her face smeared with sugar. The mother cleaned her face with the sleeve of her coat, laughing too, but with the kind of laugh that carries weight. He didn't think twice. He stood up, went back inside the bakery, and went straight to the counter. "I want 2 cupcakes. You can pick the best ones you have." The attendant smiled. "Of course, to go." "No. I want you to deliver them to that woman and the girl outside, on the benches." The woman looked out the window, confused. "The blonde lady. That's the one. But don't say it was me. Just deliver them." "But," she'll ask, "say it was a promotion, say she won, say anything. Just don't say it was me." The attendant hesitated, but his gaze was firm. She picked up the 2 largest cupcakes, placed them in a nice box with a ribbon, and went out through the side door. Jack went back to his table and pretended to be reading something on his phone. A few minutes later, he saw the woman approaching Laura. He saw the surprised expression on her face. He saw Sophie clapping her hands. He saw Laura try to refuse, but the attendant insisted. He saw, finally, she accepted, and he saw the way she opened the box slowly, carefully, as if it could disappear at any moment. Laura looked around, searching for someone, but she found no one. Just a man in a dark suit, sitting far away, looking at his phone. She didn't know that he was watching every second. Sophie picked up one of the cupcakes and offered it to her mother. "Now you can eat, Mommy. There's enough for us." Laura bit her lip. She took the sweet with both hands, as if it were too fragile to hold properly, and took a small bite. The chocolate flavor melted in her mouth. She closed her eyes for a second, letting it last. It wasn't just the taste, it was the relief. It was the permission to be human again, if only for a few minutes. "Is it good, Mommy?" "Very, my love, very." Jack saw everything. He saw the way she ate slowly, savoring every piece. He saw the gratitude on her face, and he felt something strange in his chest. It wasn't pity. He knew pity, that cold, distant thing that makes you look down on someone. It wasn't that. It was something else, something closer, more human. It was empathy. The memory of his mother returned with force. Margaret Harrison, seamstress, single mother, a woman who worked until her hands bled so that he could study, a woman who never asked for help, never complained, never gave up. And now, looking at that woman on the bench, he saw the same strength, the same silent devotion, the same kind of love that doesn't make a sound but holds the whole world on its shoulders. Laura stood up, took Sophie by the hand, and started to walk. Before leaving, she looked back again, as if wanting to find someone to thank. Her eyes passed over Jack, but he quickly looked away, pretending to be distracted. She sighed and moved on. Jack stayed there, watching the 2 of them disappear around the corner. The coffee on the table was already cold, the sun almost hidden, but something inside him had changed. He didn't know her name, he didn't know her story, but he knew, with absolute certainty, that it wasn't going to end there, because he had seen something no one else had seen. He had seen his mother in that woman, and this time he could do something about it. The following week arrived as heavy as lead. Laura woke up early that Monday, before the sun came up, and the first thing she did was look at the brown envelope on her bedside table, the termination letter. 3 dry lines, no beating around the bush. "Due to budget cuts, we regret to inform you that your services will no longer be required. Mitchell and Sons Laundry. 4 years washing, ironing, and folding clothes for people who never looked at her. 4 years waking up at 5 in the morning, and now nothing." She folded the letter, put it in the drawer, and took a deep breath. There was no time to feel sorry for herself. She had bills to pay. She had Sophie to feed. She had to get moving. She grabbed the stack of resumes she had printed at the public library, 10 pages, 10 chances, and stuffed them into an old folder. She put on her grey coat, the only presentable one she had, and tied her blonde hair into a simple ponytail. Sophie was still asleep, curled up in the thin blanket, hugging the rag doll the downstairs neighbor had given her. The doll had no name. It had no nice clothes, but for Sophie, it was perfect. Laura kissed her daughter's forehead and left without making a sound. The street was cold. The wind cut her face and the grey sky threatened rain. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder and started walking. First stop, the corner market. The owner was an old man with tired eyes, who barely looked up when she handed him the resume. "I'm not hiring. I'll take any shift. I can start tomorrow. I said I'm not hiring. Sorry." She swallowed her frustration and moved on. Second stop, a small restaurant, the air smelling of fried food. The manager looked at the paper, made a pitying face, and shook her head. "We only hire with kitchen experience." "Have you ever worked in a kitchen?" "No, but I'm a fast learner. I'm responsible. I have references." "Sorry, dear. Good luck." Third, fourth, fifth stop. Always the same answer. Always the same look of pity that solved nothing. When the clock struck noon, Laura sat on a park bench and counted the remaining resumes. 5. Half the day was gone, and she had gotten nothing but no after no. She looked up at the sky. The clouds were darker now. It was going to rain soon. Better go home. That's when she heard the tiny voice. "Mommy." Laura turned and saw Sophie running towards her, her blonde hair flying in the wind, the rag doll dangling from her arm. Her neighbor, Mrs. Irene, was right behind, holding her hand to keep her from running too fast. "She insisted on coming to see you," the old woman said, out of breath. "Said she wanted to help you." Laura felt a pang in her chest. She knelt and opened her arms. Sophie jumped into them, all smiles. "I wanted to help you look for a job, Mommy. My love, you don't have to. You'll get tired. But I want to be with you." Laura looked at Mrs. Irene, who shrugged with a tired smile. "She's stubborn, just like her mother." Laura thanked her and took her daughter's hand. The two started walking again, now together. Sophie hummed softly, clutching the doll against her chest, oblivious to the weight Laura carried on her shoulders. They passed by 3 more stores. Nothing. The sky began to drizzle. Small, cold drops that soon turned into a fine, persistent rain. Laura picked Sophie up, covered her head with her jacket, and quickened her pace. It was while turning a corner, head down, trying to protect her daughter from the rain, that she bumped into someone. The impact was light, but enough to make the folder fall to the ground. The resumes scattered, starting to get wet on the pavement. "Oh, no. I'm so sorry." Laura quickly knelt, trying to gather the papers before they were ruined. "It's okay, I'll help." The voice was deep, calm. Laura looked up and saw a man in a dark suit, crouched beside her, picking up the wet resumes. He was in his early 30s, short brown hair, a serious but kind look in his eyes. It took her a second to recognize him. "It's okay. I remember you from the bakery." Laura blinked, still processing. Oh, the man from the little table. The one who was there when the cupcakes appeared out of nowhere. "Oh, thank you, again." Jack gave a half smile, handing the papers back to her. They were a bit crumpled, but still usable. Laura took the resumes and tried to organize them in the folder. Her hands were shaking a little, more from exhaustion than from the cold. Sophie tugged on her mother's sleeve, her blue eyes wide and scared. "Mommy, are we going to have a place to live?" The silence that followed was heavy. Laura felt tears burn in her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly, not in front of her daughter, never in front of her daughter. "Yes, we will, my love. Mommy will figure something out." But her voice came out trembling, and Jack heard it. He stood there looking at that blonde woman, soaked with rain, holding her daughter in her arms and trying to keep her composure. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes. He saw the kindness that still existed there, even after everything. He saw the strength she tried to show, even though she was clearly at her limit. And he also saw the old doll the girl was holding. He saw the worn-out shoes. He saw the jacket that was too thin for a rain like this. He knew that. He knew because he had seen the same scene years ago. His mother, coming home from work, wet to the bone, carrying him because the bus had broken down and she didn't have money for a taxi. He remembered the smell of rain mixed with cheap soap. He remembered the way she smiled, even when she was tired, and said everything was okay, but it wasn't, and he knew it. Jack swallowed hard. Something moved inside him. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was something else, something more instinctive, more human. It was the same desire he had felt as a child, the desire for someone to show up and help his mother, for someone to see how much she was struggling, for someone to say, "You don't have to do this alone." But no one ever showed up. And now, he was here. He could be that someone. The rain continued to fall, cold and insistent. Sophie shivered in her mother's arms, clutching the doll against her chest. Laura noticed and adjusted the jacket around her daughter, trying to protect her from the wind. "Do you live far?" Jack asked, carefully. Laura hesitated. "About a 20-minute walk. 20 minutes walking in the rain." Jack frowned. "Let me call a car for you." "No, you don't have to. I'm not asking." He already had his phone in his hand, ordering the car. Laura was speechless. She didn't know whether to be grateful or embarrassed, maybe both. A few minutes later, a car pulled up in front of them. Jack opened the back door. "Get in. It's going to be okay." Laura got in, still not quite understanding what was happening. Sophie settled into her lap, finally protected from the rain. The rag doll was wet, but the girl didn't seem to mind. Jack closed the door, but before leaving, he leaned down to the window. "If you need anything." He hesitated. "I usually stop by the bakery every afternoon, around the same time." Laura didn't know what to say. She just nodded, grateful. The car drove off. She watched out the window, seeing his silhouette disappear in the rain. She didn't know what to think. She didn't know if she would see him again. But one thing she knew. For the first time in a long time, someone had looked at her and seen more than just someone in need of help. They had seen someone who deserved it. And Jack, standing there in the rain, watching the car disappear around the corner, felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like he had done the right thing. Not for the unknown woman, but for the mother he was never able to help. 2 days later, Laura was sitting on a park bench, staring into space. The afternoon sun cast a weak light on the trees, and a few children were running around nearby, laughing loudly. But to her, everything seemed distant, as if she were watching life happen through a fogged-up window. Sophie was playing on the grass a few feet away, making the rag doll walk and talk by itself. She created different voices, invented stories, pretended she was in a castle full of princesses. Her imagination was the only thing that still worked perfectly in that crumbling world. Laura squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold back the tears. Crying was useless. Crying didn't pay the rent. It didn't put food on the table. It didn't stop the eviction that was going to happen at the end of the week. She had canvassed the entire city looking for a job. She had knocked on more than 20 doors, and they all closed in her face. No experience, no recent references, no luck. 3 days left. 3 days to pull off a miracle. She looked at Sophie, who was now making the doll dance, spinning in place with her arms outstretched. Her blonde hair shone in the sun, and she laughed, completely oblivious to her mother's desperation. Laura bit her lip hard. She couldn't give up. She couldn't let her daughter see how scared she was. But God, it was so hard to pretend everything was okay when everything was falling apart. "Mommy, look, the dolly is flying." Sophie lifted the doll into the air and ran in circles, laughing. Laura forced a smile. "That's beautiful, my love." But her voice came out weak, tired. That's when she saw a shadow approaching. She looked up and saw a man standing there, looking at her. It took a second to recognize him. Jack, the man from the bakery, the man from the rain. He was wearing a simple dress shirt, no tie, and his hands were in his pants pockets. His gaze was serious, but there was something kind there, something Laura couldn't quite figure out. "Laura, I was looking for you." She blinked, confused. "Looking for me?" "Yes." He came closer but kept a respectful distance. He didn't want to scare her. She already looked scared enough. "I've been thinking a lot these past few days, and I need someone trustworthy to take care of the house." Laura frowned, trying to understand. Take care of the house, cleaning, organizing, that sort of thing. "My house is big, and I live alone. I don't have time to take care of everything." He was lying. The house wasn't that big, and he had a cleaner who came twice a week, but she didn't need to know that. Laura felt her heart race. It was a chance, a door opening when all the others had closed. "I'll take it," she said quickly, before he could change his mind. "I'll take anything, sir. We're about to be evicted." Her voice broke at the end of the sentence. She looked away, ashamed to have said it out loud, to have admitted how desperate she was. Jack felt a tightness in his chest. He knew. He had known since the first day at the bakery. He knew from the worn-out clothes, the scuffed shoes, the way she counted coins before buying anything. But hearing her say it out loud was different. He took a deep breath. "I have a room in the back of the house. It's simple, but it has a bed, a bathroom. You can stay there until you get back on your feet." The silence that followed was long. Laura stood there, processing what she had just heard. She looked at him, trying to find any sign of a lie, any hidden catch, but all she saw was sincerity. Are you serious?" "Completely. But why? You don't even know me." Jack hesitated. How could he explain without sounding crazy? How could he say that he saw his own mother in her? That he saw the struggle, the exhaustion, the silent devotion of someone who does everything alone and never asks for help? "I know enough," he said, simply. Laura felt the tears come with full force this time. She tried to hold them back, but she couldn't. She covered her face with her hands and cried. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of relief, of hope, of finally being able to breathe after holding her breath for so long. Sophie stopped playing and ran to her mother. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Laura quickly wiped her face and pulled her daughter into her lap. "These are happy tears, my love. Happy tears." Sophie didn't quite understand, but she hugged her mother anyway. Then she looked at Jack with curiosity. "Who are you?" Jack knelt, getting down to her level. "My name is Jack, and you are Sophie. This is my dolly." She showed him the rag doll, all faded and patched up. Jack smiled. "She's very pretty. What's her name?" "I haven't picked one yet. I'm thinking about it. When you decide, let me know." Sophie gave a wide smile. It was the first time someone other than her mother had asked about the doll. The first time someone seemed genuinely interested. Laura wiped away the rest of her tears and looked at Jack, still a little stunned. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me. Just show up tomorrow. I'll give you the address." He took a business card from his pocket and wrote the address on the back. He handed it to her carefully. "You can come any time. I'll be there." Laura took the card with both hands as if it was something precious, and it was. It was the first solid thing she'd had in weeks, the first real promise that things could get better. "We'll be there. Thank you. Thank you so much." Jack gave a slight nod and started to walk away, but before he left, he looked back one last time. Sophie had gone back to playing with her doll, but now she was different. She was smiling more. She was lighter, as if she sensed that something had changed, and it had. Laura stayed there, sitting on the bench, looking at the card in her hands. She read the address 3 times, just to be sure she wasn't dreaming. For the first time in a long time, she felt something she had forgotten what it was like to feel. Hope. It wasn't much. It was just a room in the back of a house. It was just a temporary job, but it was more than she had yesterday. It was more than she thought she would get. It was enough to keep going. Sophie came running and jumped into her lap again. "Mommy, he's nice. I like him." Laura hugged her daughter tightly. "Me too, my love. Me too." And there, in that simple park, with the sun beginning to set and the wind blowing gently, something began. It wasn't just a job offer. It wasn't just a roof over their heads. It was the first spark of something bigger, something neither of them could name yet, but that was already there, beginning to shine. Hope had returned, and with it, the possibility of a new beginning. The next morning, Laura and Sophie stood in front of the gate. The house was big. Not a mansion, but much bigger than any place Laura had ever lived. 2 stories, impeccable white paint, a well-kept garden. The kind of place she only saw from a distance when she passed by on the bus through the nicer neighborhoods of the city. Sophie squeezed her mother's hand, her blue eyes wide. "Are we going to live here, Mommy?" "In the back, my love. In a part just for us." Laura took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, Jack opened the door. He was wearing a simple shirt and jeans. He looked more relaxed than in their other encounters. "Good morning, come in." They entered slowly, almost afraid to get the clean floor dirty. The inside of the house was quiet. Light-colored walls, simple but beautiful furniture, everything very organized. There was no mess, no life. It was beautiful, but empty. A place that breathed loneliness. Jack closed the door and led the way. "I'll show you to your room. It's in the back, as I said." They crossed the living room, passed through the spacious kitchen, and reached a narrow hallway. At the end, there was a wooden door. Jack opened it. The room was small. It had a single bed against the wall, an old but well-maintained wardrobe, a bedside table, and a window that looked out onto the backyard. The bathroom was next door, with a shower, sink, and toilet. Everything simple, everything clean. Laura entered slowly, looking around as if she were stepping on sacred ground. The smell of soap and clean sheets filled her nostrils. It was a smell she knew well, the smell of care, of tidiness, of a safe place, so different from the smell of mold and dampness of the apartment where they used to live, so different from the constant fear of not having a place to sleep the next night. Sophie let go of her mother's hand and ran to the bed, jumping on it with the doll in her arm. "Look, Mommy, the bed is soft." Laura felt a lump in her throat. It had been months since Sophie had a real bed. She had slept on a mattress on the floor, on a borrowed sofa, in any corner where they could fit. And now, there she was, jumping on a clean bed, laughing, safe. Jack stood at the door, watching their reaction. He saw the way Laura touched the comforter carefully, as if she were afraid of ruining it. He saw the shy smile she tried to hide. He saw her daughter exploring every corner of the room as if it were a treasure. "I hope you'll be comfortable here." Laura turned to him, her eyes welling up. "It's more than I could have dreamed of, sir." Jack shook his head slowly. "Just call me Jack." "Okay, no, sir." She gave a small smile and nodded. "And you can use the kitchen whenever you want. There's food in the fridge. You can eat whatever you need. If anything is missing, just let me know." "Thank you, Jack. Really." He gave a slight nod and left, closing the door to give them privacy. Laura stood there in the middle of the room, trying to process everything. It didn't feel real. It felt like at any moment she would wake up and discover it was just a cruel dream. But it wasn't. She had a roof over her head. She had a safe place for her daughter to sleep. And for the first time in months, she didn't have to look over her shoulder in fear of being evicted. Sophie jumped off the bed and ran to the window. "Mommy, there are trees outside, and flowers." Laura went over and looked out the window. The backyard was small but tidy, with green grass and some flowers planted along the edges. Nothing extravagant. But to Sophie it looked like a paradise. "It's pretty, isn't it?" "It is." "Can I play out there?" "You can. But let's put our things away first." Sophie agreed, excited, and went back to exploring the room. Laura sat on the edge of the bed and let the tears fall. But this time, they weren't tears of desperation. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope slowly being reborn, like a plant that finally finds sunlight after months in the shade. In the days that followed, something changed in the house. Laura would wake up early before Jack left for work and start taking care of the place. Not because he asked her to, but because she needed to repay him somehow. She needed to feel useful. She needed to prove that she deserved to be there. She would clean the kitchen, organize the cabinets, do the dishes. She made fresh coffee every morning, and the smell would spread throughout the house, breaking the heavy silence that used to dominate the place. The house started to smell different. It was no longer just the neutral smell of professional cleaning. It was the smell of life, of brewed coffee, of toasted bread, of something being prepared with care. Jack noticed it in the first week. He came down to the kitchen on a Thursday morning and found the table set: a cup, a plate, a folded napkin, a thermos with hot coffee, toast ready, butter on the side, even a small flower in a little glass cup in the center of the table. He stopped at the door, surprised. Laura was at the sink, washing a pan. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "Good morning, I made coffee, I hope you like it." Jack blinked, still processing. You don't have to do that. I know. But I wanted to." He didn't argue. He sat at the table and poured himself some coffee. The first sip was hot, strong, perfect. It had been years since he'd had coffee made by someone else. It had been years since he'd sat at the table in the morning and found food waiting for him. The last time had been with his mother. Margaret always woke up before him, prepared everything, even when she was exhausted, even when she could barely stand. "It's good," he said sincerely. "Very good." Laura smiled, satisfied, and went back to washing the pan. Sophie came running in, still in her pajamas, holding her doll. "Good morning, Jack." "Good morning, Sophie. Did you sleep well?" "I did. The bed is really good, and it's not noisy." She said it so naturally that Jack felt a pang in his chest. Not noisy. How many nights had she spent in places where the noise wouldn't let her sleep? How many times had she woken up startled by shouting, slamming doors, sirens? Laura noticed his look and quickly changed the subject. "Sophie, go brush your teeth. We'll have breakfast after." The girl ran back to her room. Jack was silent for a few seconds, stirring his coffee, looking at the set table, the glass with the flour, the clean dishes drying in the rack. All so simple, but so different. Is Sophie in school? The question came out casually, but Laura felt its weight. She lowered her eyes, ashamed. "I had to take her out of school. Things got tough." Jack stopped stirring his coffee. He looked at her, but Laura didn't raise her head. She kept washing the pan, scrubbing hard, as if she wanted to erase the shame along with the dirt. Did she like it? She loved it. She loved to draw. She loved her classmates. She always came home telling stories. Her voice broke. "But I couldn't pay the tuition. I tried to negotiate, but it didn't work out." Jack was quiet. He didn't say anything, but something inside him stirred. He remembered his mother sewing at night. He remembered her with swollen eyes from straining her vision in the dim light of the old lamp. He remembered asking her why she didn't stop to rest. "I need to finish this, dear. It's to pay for your school." He was 8 years old. He didn't really understand. He thought everyone went to school, that it was something natural, guaranteed. Only when he grew up did he understand the price his mother paid. He understood that every uniform, every notebook, every pencil had cost hours of her life. Hours she would never get back. And now, looking at Laura, he saw the same struggle, the same devotion, the same silent pain of someone who makes impossible choices every day. He finished his coffee in silence and stood up. "Thanks for the coffee." "You're welcome." Jack left the kitchen, but before leaving the house, he stopped in the hallway and looked back. He saw Laura drying her hands on a dish towel. He saw Sophie running back, laughing, jumping into her mother's arms. And he made a decision, silent, firm. He was going to change this. The weeks that followed brought a new routine to the house. Laura took care of everything with dedication. She cleaned, cooked, organized. The house, which was once just a structure, began to come to life. The smell of food in the air, a child's laughter echoing through the hallways, soft music playing in the kitchen while Laura prepared dinner. She put flowers in the windows. She opened the curtains to let the light in. She left the windows open so the house could breathe. Small gestures that made all the difference. Jack would come home from work and find the house different, warmer, more alive. One evening he came in and saw Sophie sitting at the kitchen table, drawing on old sheets of paper Laura had found in a cabinet. She was drawing flowers, butterflies, little houses with chimneys puffing out smoke. "What are you drawing?" Jack asked, pulling up a chair. "A house. It's our house." She showed him the drawing. There were 3 people in front of the house. A blonde woman, a little girl, and a man in a shirt. "This one is you." She pointed to the man. Jack felt something strange in his chest. He was in the drawing. He was part of that house, of that makeshift family that had formed without anyone planning it. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice a bit choked up. "Can I give it to you as a present?" "You can. I'll keep it." Sophie smiled and went back to drawing. Laura, who was frying something on the stove, glanced over and smiled too, and Jack realized something. That house, which had always been silent and empty, had finally become a home, not because of the structure, not because of the furniture or the size, but because of them, because of the laughter that echoed, because of the smell of food, because of the flour on the table, because of the drawing stuck to the fridge, because of all the little things he never knew he needed until they arrived. A few more days passed. Jack watched Laura work. He saw the way she carefully folded the clothes, how she organized the cabinets, how she cleaned every corner of the house as if it were her own. She didn't slack off. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for anything. And that bothered him. Not because she worked too much, but because he knew she was used to not asking, used to fending for herself, used to not expecting help from anyone. He knew that. He had seen it in his mother. One afternoon, he came home early from work and found Laura in the living room, fixing a button on one of his shirts that had fallen off. She hadn't even asked. She just saw it and fixed it. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know. But it was going to fall off anyway. Better to fix it now." She tied a final knot in the thread and cut it with her teeth. She handed the shirt back to him. Impeccable. Jack held the shirt and looked at her, at the simple way she did things, at the way she transformed the house without making a fuss. "Laura, are you okay here?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "I am." "Why?" "Just wanted to make sure. We're more than okay, Jack. For the first time in a long time, I can sleep without fear. Sophie is happy. That's all I could ever want." She smiled sincerely, and Jack felt his chest tighten, because he knew she deserved more than just security. She deserved more than just a roof over her head. She deserved a real chance to rebuild her life, and he was going to give it to her. 2 days later, Jack made a call. He was in his office, alone, looking out the window. He picked up his phone and dialed the number of a private school he knew. A good school. The same one he had attended when he was older, after getting a scholarship. "Good afternoon, I'd like to talk about enrollment." The receptionist on the other end was polite but direct. "Of course. For which grade?" "First grade. The student's name is Sophie Bennett." He gave all the necessary information, address, date of birth, documents he would provide. The receptionist wrote everything down and confirmed that the spot was secured. "Perfect. When can she start?" "Next Monday. I'll prepare everything. We just need the documentation by Friday." "Will do, thank you." He hung up and stared at his phone. He wasn't going to tell Laura yet. He was going to take care of everything first. Documents, uniform, supplies, everything. And only then would he tell her, because he knew she would try to refuse. She would say she couldn't accept, that she already owed him too much, but he wasn't doing it out of duty. He was doing it because it was the right thing to do, because Sophie deserved to have a childhood. She deserved to have friends, teachers, colored pencils, and new notebooks. She deserved to dream, because Laura deserved to see her daughter grow up with opportunities she herself never had, and because, somehow, he was paying a debt, not to them, But to the mother, he was never able to help. Margaret had died tired. She had worked until she couldn't anymore. And he, even after becoming an adult, even after getting a good job, never had the chance to repay her. She was gone before he could. But now, he had the chance to do things differently. Now he could be for Laura what no one was for his mother. And this time, he wasn't going to let it pass. The weeks went by, and the house changed in a way Jack had never imagined. Sophie had this gift of filling empty spaces, not with annoying noise or unnecessary mess, but with life, with curiosity, with that pure energy that only children have. She moved around the house as if she were exploring a new world every day. She discovered corners, opened drawers, asked questions about everything. And Jack, who had always valued silence, found that he didn't mind at all. One Saturday afternoon, he was in the living room reading some documents when Sophie appeared with a pile of old papers and colored pencils. "Jack, can I draw here?" He looked at her, then at the glass coffee table. "You can, but use this magazine underneath so you don't scratch the table." "Okay, okay." She sat on the rug, spread the pencils around her, and started to draw. Jack went back to reading, but he couldn't concentrate. He kept glancing at the girl, at the way she bit her tongue while drawing, at the way she carefully chose the colors. "What are you drawing?" "A giant butterfly." "How giant?" "As big as a dog," Jack laughed. "Butterflies aren't that big." "But they could be. It would be cool, right? We could fly on them." She spoke with such conviction that Jack almost believed her. He could almost imagine a butterfly the size of a dog, colorful, flying around. It would be very cool. Sophie continued drawing, humming a song Jack didn't know. Something about stars and the moon. Her voice was thin, off-key, but there was something comforting about it. Laura appeared at the living room door, drying her hands on her apron. "Sophie, you're not bothering Jack, are you?" "Not at all," Jack answered before the girl could speak. "She's drawing, it's fine." Laura smiled and went back to the kitchen. Sophie continued on the rug, now drawing flowers around the giant butterfly. "Jack, what do you do for work?" "I work with companies. I help them get better organized." Sophie stopped drawing and looked at him with wide eyes. "Like, you're the boss?" "Sort of. I give advice to the people who are the bosses." "Then you must be very smart." Jack gave a half smile. "I hope so. Do you wear a suit to work?" "Sometimes. It depends on the day. My mommy said that men in suits are important." Jack was quiet for a second. Then he put the papers down on the table and turned completely to Sophie. "And you think I'm important?" Sophie tilted her head to the side, thinking seriously about the question. "You must be a very important man, right?" "Why do you think so?" "Because all important men are serious. But you're not. You're nice." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just surprising. Jack blinked, processing. Then, for the first time in a long time, he laughed. A real laugh. Not the polite laugh he used in meetings. Not the forced smile of someone trying to seem friendly. It was a genuine laugh. Light, free. Sophie smiled back, satisfied, and went back to drawing, as if she hadn't just said something that moved Jack in a way he couldn't even explain. In the kitchen, Laura heard it. She stopped what she was doing and stood there, with the dish towel in her hand. She heard his laughter echo through the house. And she smiled too, because that sound, that simple and unexpected laugh, was proof that something had changed, that the house was no longer just a place where he lived. It was a place where he lived. In the following days, Sophie continued to be Sophie. She sang while playing in the yard. She drew on any piece of paper she found. She asked questions about everything: why the sky was blue, why trees lost their leaves, why the neighbor's dog barked so much. And Jackin, who had always been a man of few words, found that he enjoyed answering. He enjoyed her curiosity. He enjoyed the way she absorbed everything, as if the world were a box of surprises waiting to be opened. One afternoon, He came home from work and found Sophie sitting on the front steps, waiting. "Hi, Jack." "Hi, Sophie. What are you doing out here?" "Waiting for you." "Why?" "To show you something." She took his hand and pulled him towards the yard. There, near the flowers, she pointed to a small yellow butterfly perched on a leaf. "Look, it's not giant, but it's pretty, right?" Jack crouched beside her, watching the butterfly. "It is. Very pretty. Do you think it has a name?" "I don't think so. Butterflies don't have names." "Then I'll give it one. I'll call her Lily." "Lily is a good name." Sophie stayed there, crouched, looking at the butterfly with a fascination that only a child can have. Jack stayed by her side, in silence, just watching. And he realized he couldn't remember the last time he had stopped to look at a butterfly. To look at anything, really. Life had always been a rush. There was always a meeting, an appointment, something to take care of. He had forgotten what it was like to just stop and observe. Jack. Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. He looked at the girl, who was still watching the butterfly. "Why do you ask?" "Because my mommy said we have to be thankful when we meet good people, and you're a good person. So I wanted to know if you're happy too." Jack swallowed hard. He didn't know what to answer. Happiness had always been an abstract concept for him, something he pursued without really knowing what it was. Success, money, recognition. He had all of that, but happiness. He had never stopped to think about it. "I'm getting there," he said, finally. I'm getting there." Sophie smiled. "That's good." And she went back to watching the butterfly. Laura appeared at the kitchen door, calling them both for dinner. Sophie ran off, shouting that she had named the butterfly. Jack stayed there a few more seconds, looking at the yard, at the butterfly that had already flown away. And he realized that Sophie was right. He was getting happy, not because of money, not because of success, but because of this, of these simple moments, of these silly conversations, of that feeling of belonging to something bigger than himself. The house had come to life, and so had he. That night, after dinner, Sophie asked to draw a little more before bed. Laura let her down, and she sat at the kitchen table with her pencils spread out. Jack was washing the dishes, something he never used to do but which had become a routine. Laura was drying. The two worked in a comfortable silence, while Sophie hummed softly. "She likes you," Laura said, suddenly. Jack looked at her. "I like her too. She's never had that. A male figure who was present, kind." Jack said nothing. He just continued washing the dishes. "Thank you, Jack, for everything. You've already thanked me 100 times, and I'll thank you 100 more." He smiled slightly. He handed her a plate to dry. "You two have transformed this house," he said, almost in a whisper. "I didn't even know it could be like this." Laura looked at him, surprised. But before she could answer, Sophie called out, "Mommy, Jack, look." She had drawn the three of them, Laura, Sophie, and Jack, holding hands in front of the house. There was a huge sun in the sky and colorful flowers everywhere. "It's us," she said proudly. Laura felt her eyes burn. Jack stared at the drawing, speechless. And there, fought in that simple kitchen, with dishes to wash and colored pencils spread across the table, the three of them understood something without needing to say it. They were a family, not in the traditional sense, not on paper, but in what mattered, in the care, in the presence, in the love that was growing silently but firmly between those walls. The child had brought light back to the space, and none of them wanted to live in the dark anymore. The late afternoon arrived slowly, painting the sky orange and pink. Jack was on the back porch, sitting in one of the wooden chairs he had never used before. He had a cup of coffee in his hand, already cold, but he didn't mind. He just sat there, looking at the yard, at the way the light hit the trees. Sophie was playing on the grass, making her rag doll talk to the flowers. Her thin voice came in snippets, mixed with the sound of the wind in the leaves. Laura appeared at the door, drying her hands on her apron. "Can I sit?" Jack nodded yes. She pulled up the other chair and sat next to him. They were silent for a few minutes, just watching Sophie play, watching the sun go down slowly. It was a comfortable silence, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled with empty words. "She's happy here," Laura said, finally. "I know, you can see it. It's been a long time since I've seen her like this. So light." Jack took a sip of the cold coffee and continued looking at the yard. "Can I ask you something personal?" Laura turned her face to him, curious. "You can..." Jack hesitated for a second. He didn't want to seem invasive, but the curiosity had been there, growing since the first day. "What about Sophie's father?" Laura looked down. Jack almost regretted asking, but before he could take it back, she answered, "He left when he found out I was pregnant, said he wasn't ready." Her voice was calm, but there was a weight to it. The weight of someone who had carried that for too long. "We had been together for a year. I thought it was serious. I thought he would stay." She gave a bitter smile. "But when I told him, he changed. He said it was too soon, that he had plans, that he couldn't deal with it." Jack was quiet, letting her talk. "I tried to convince him. I said we could manage, that I worked, that he didn't have to give up anything, but he had already made up his mind. He disappeared a week later, never came back, never asked about Sophie, never sent a cent." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I learned not to wait for anyone anymore. I learned that, in the end, the only person I can trust is myself." Jack gripped the cup in his hands. He felt anger. Anger at a man he had never met. Anger at someone who had abandoned a pregnant woman, who had abandoned his own daughter. "I'm sorry. Don't be. I got over it. Sophie never knew him. To her, he doesn't exist, and I prefer it that way." Laura looked to the side at Jack's face, trying to read what he was thinking. But he remained serious, looking straight ahead. "And you?" she asked, turning the tables. "Never married, never had kids?" Jack gave a half smile. "No, never found the right person. Or maybe I was never the right person. I don't know. Hard to believe. You're kind, responsible. Any woman would be lucky." He shook his head, dismissing the compliment. "My mother raised me alone too. She worked until her hands bled." Laura turned completely towards him, interested. It was the first time he had really talked about his mother. She had already noticed that the subject was sensitive, but she had never pushed. What was she like? Jack was silent for a while. He fidgeted with his cup, looked at the sky that was getting darker. Strong, determined, and tired. Always tired. He paused, gathering his words. "My father left when I was 3. I don't remember him. I only remember my mother. She sewed for a living, made clothes, did repairs, anything that came her way. She worked late every day." Laura listened in silence, sensing that he needed to talk. "I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing her still there, at the sewing machine. The lamplight was dim and she would strain her eyes. Her hands were always full of needle pricks. They bled often, but she never stopped." His voice got lower. "She went hungry so I could study. She never asked for anything, never complained. She just did it. And I, as a child, didn't understand. I thought it was normal, that all mothers did that. And when did you understand? Too late." The silence returned, but it was different now. It was a complicit silence, of someone who understands the other's pain without needing an explanation. Jack stood up and went into the house. Laura stayed there, confused, but didn't ask anything. A few minutes later, he came back with something in his hand, an old photo. He handed it to Laura. She took it carefully as if it were too fragile to hold. The photo was faded, yellowed with time. It showed a woman in her early 30s, brown hair tied in a bun, a tired face but a sweet smile. She was wearing a simple dress and standing in front of a small house. This is her, Margaret Harrison. Laura looked at the photo attentively. She saw the exhaustion in the woman's eyes, but she also saw the sweetness, the strength, the same strength she recognized in herself. She was beautiful. She was, and hard-working, and alone. Jack sat down again, took the photo back, and stared at it. She died when I was 22. Heart attack. The doctors said it was from overwork, said her body just gave up. Laura felt her chest tighten. I was already in college. I had gotten a scholarship. I was starting to make money with some freelance jobs. I was finally going to be able to help her, give her a better life, but there wasn't enough time. He paused, looking at the sky that was now almost dark. She spent her whole life raising me, sacrificed everything, and when I was finally in a position to give back, she was gone. Laura didn't know what to say. Any words seemed too small to console a pain of that magnitude. "I'm sure she knew," Laura said finally. "She knew you would make it, that you would be okay. That was enough for her." Jack looked at Laura. He saw the sincerity in her eyes, and he felt something loosen inside his chest. "You remind me of her," Laura blinked, surprised. "Me?" "Yes. The way you take care of Sophie, the way you do everything alone and don't complain, the way you always put her first, it's the same." He put the photo in his shirt pocket and looked at Laura again. "When I saw you two at that bakery, you saying you didn't like sweets so that Sophie could have it all, I saw my mother. I saw her saying she had already eaten, that she wasn't hungry, lying so that I could eat." Laura felt her eyes burn. "And when I saw you in the rain, desperate, with nowhere to go, I thought, this time I can do something. This time I can help. Jack, I know you think you owe me something, but you don't. I'm the one who owes. I owe my mother. I owe all the women who do what you do, who raise children alone, who work until they can't anymore, who give up everything." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Helping you isn't charity, Laura. It's giving back. It's doing what I couldn't do for my mother." Laura wiped away the tears that had started to fall. She didn't know what to say. No words seemed sufficient. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for seeing us." Jack nodded. They sat there in silence as the sky turned completely dark and the first stars began to appear. Sophie came running, doll in her arm. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Laura quickly wiped her face and smiled. "Let's make dinner then. How about pasta?" "I'll help," Sophie shouted, excited. She ran inside. Laura got up to follow, but before she did, she looked at Jack. "Your mother was lucky to have you. I think it was the other way around." Laura smiled and went inside. Jack stayed there a few more minutes, alone on the porch, looking at the dark sky. And for the first time since his mother died, he felt that he had done something right, something that mattered, something she would be proud of. He couldn't change the past. He couldn't bring his mother back. He couldn't repay everything she did for him. But he could do things differently now. He could be for Laura what no one was for Margaret. He could be the help she never received. And that, somehow, was enough. Later, after dinner, Jack went up to his room and opened the drawer of his bedside table. He took out his mother's photo and looked at it for a long time. "I'm trying, Mom," he whispered. "I'm trying to do what you would do." He put the photo back and lay down. The sound of laughter came from downstairs. Laura and Sophie washing the dishes, singing some silly song. And for the first time in years, Jack slept peacefully, because he knew he was on the right path. It wasn't about saving anyone. It was about being present, about caring, about giving back to the world a little of the kindness he had received, and that finally made sense. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Jack left work early. He had a meeting that was cancelled at the last minute, and he decided to take the opportunity to go downtown and buy a few things. Nothing urgent, just things he could have put off, but decided to do that day. He was passing by a stationery store when he saw two familiar figures across the street, Laura and Sophie. They were standing at the window of a small shop, looking inside. Sophie was pointing at something, excited, and Laura was smiling, nodding yes. Jack was about to cross the street to greet them when something caught his attention. A man. He was standing a few feet behind them, looking in their direction. He was wearing a dark jacket, a cap, hands in his pockets. He didn't seem to be doing anything wrong, but there was something in the way he looked, something tense, something wrong. Jack stopped where he was and continued to watch. Laura and Sophie went into the store. The man hesitated, looked around, and also went in. Jack crossed the street and stood near the window, pretending to look at other stores, but keeping an eye on the two of them. He saw Laura buy some colorful ribbons and a simple notebook for Sophie. He saw the girl hug the notebook with excitement, as if it were the greatest treasure in the world. And he saw the man standing near the door, watching. When Laura came out with Sophie by the hand, the man also came out. But this time Jack was sure he was following them. Jack felt his whole body tense up. He took a few steps in their direction, ready to intervene, but the man stopped. He stood there on the sidewalk, watching Laura and Sophie disappear around the corner. Then he turned and walked away in the opposite direction. Jack stood there, processing. Who was that man? Why was he following them? He thought about calling Laura, about warning her, but he didn't want to scare her without being sure. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was overreacting. But something inside him said he wasn't. The next day, Jack was in the backyard, organizing some tools, when he heard the doorbell ring. He found it strange. He wasn't expecting anyone. Laura and Sophie had just left to go grocery shopping. He dried his hands and went to the gate. On the other side was the man from the day before. Up close, Jack could see him better. He was in his 30s, maybe younger. Dark hair, unshaven, light eyes. He didn't look threatening, but he didn't look friendly either. "Can I help you?" Jack asked, keeping the gate closed. "I'm looking for Laura. I know she lives here." Jack crossed his arms. "Who are you?" "David. Sophie's father." The air grew heavy. Jack felt his stomach churn. So it was him. The man who had abandoned a pregnant Laura. The man who had never come back. The man who suddenly, after years, appeared out of nowhere. "What do you want?" That's when Laura appeared at the door of the house, drawn by the voices. She turned pale when she saw who was on the other side of the gate. "David." The name came out as a whisper. David turned to her, his eyes lighting up for a second. "Laura, I need to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about." She took a few steps forward, standing next to Jack. Her legs were shaking, but she stood firm. "I want to see my daughter." "You have no right to go after her," Laura said, her voice stronger now. "She grew up not knowing who you are. And it's going to stay that way." David narrowed his eyes. "I'm her father." "No, you're just a name I never mentioned. You have no rights over her." "I do, legally." "Legally?" Laura laughed, but it was a bitter, pained laugh. "You disappeared. You never sent money. You never asked if she was okay. You never wanted to know if we had a place to live, what we ate. And now you come talking about rights." David opened his mouth to answer, but Jack interrupted. "She already said it. You have nothing here. Go away." "I'm not leaving without seeing her." His voice rose. Jack didn't blink. "Go away. We don't accept threats here." The two stood in silence, staring at each other. David was breathing heavily, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Jack thought he was going to try something. But then David took a step back. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. Because if you show up here again, I'm calling the police. And I guarantee you won't want that." David spat on the ground, turned and walked away, slamming the gate behind him. Jack stood there, watching him disappear down the street. His heart was still racing. His hands were shaking slightly. He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. A few minutes later, he heard footsteps behind him. Laura. She was standing at the entrance of the house, pale, her eyes wide. Sophie was next to her, holding her mother's hand, confused. "Did you..." "Did you hear?" Jack asked. Laura nodded. "Yes." The tears began to fall. He showed up. After all this time. He showed up. Jack approached slowly. "He's gone. He won't be back." "How do you know?" "Because he knows he has no place here. He knows he'll have to deal with me if he tries anything." Laura covered her face with her hands and cried. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of relief. Of fear that could finally come out. Of tension she didn't even know she was holding. Sophie tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Laura knelt and hugged her daughter tightly. "It's okay, my love. It's okay." Jack stood there, not knowing what to do. He wanted to hug them both. He wanted to say that everything was resolved. But he stood still, respecting their moment. When Laura finally calmed down, she stood up and looked at Jack. Her eyes were still red, but there was gratitude there, a deep gratitude. "Thank you, Jack. You don't have to thank me. I do. You defended me. You defended Sophie. You had no obligation to, but you did it anyway." Jack shook his head. "You're safe now. He won't be back. And if he does, I'll take care of it." Laura wiped her tears and gave a faint smile. "How can I thank you for this? How can I repay you?" "You don't repay me. You just stay here. Keep taking care of Sophie. Keep being you." Sophie, who still didn't quite understand what was happening, let go of her mother's hand and went to Jack. She hugged his leg, squeezing tight. "Thank you for taking care of us, Jack." He looked down at the girl's blonde hair resting on his leg and felt his chest tighten. He knelt and picked her up. "Always, Sophie, always." Laura watched the two of them, and something inside her changed. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something bigger, something she couldn't name yet, but that was there, growing slowly. Later, when Sophie was already asleep, Laura and Jack sat on the porch. The silence was comfortable, Anna, but heavy. They were both still processing what had happened. "I don't know if he's really going to let it go," Laura said, staring into space. "He will. Men like him are cowards. They only show up when they think they can get something easy. But when they meet resistance, they disappear. And if he comes back, I'll deal with it." Laura looked at him, at his broad shoulders, his serious but kind face. And she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Security. Not because of his money, not because of the house, but because of him, because of his presence, because of the protection he offered without asking for anything in return. "He never did that," she said softly. "He never defended me, never stood by my side." Jack turned to her. "Then he doesn't deserve to be remembered." Laura smiled, even with her eyes still red. "Thank you, really. You've thanked me about 10 times today, and I'll thank you 10 more tomorrow." Jack chuckled softly. Laura did too. And there, on that porch, in the silence that followed, something changed. The male figure in their lives had been inverted. It was no longer about abandonment. It was no longer about absence. It was no longer about broken promises. It was about presence, about protection, about someone who stayed. And for the first time, Laura understood what it was like to have someone truly on her side. Someone who didn't run when things got tough. Someone who stayed. The rain started to fall right after dinner. It wasn't that fine, delicate rain. It was heavy, noisy, the kind that makes you happy to be inside. The drops hit the roof hard, and the sound filled the silence of the night. Sophie had gone to bed early, tired from playing all day. Laura had just finished tidying up the kitchen and went to the living room where Jack was sitting on the sofa, looking out the window. The light in the room was low, just a lamp on in the corner, creating soft shadows on the walls. "Can I sit?" Laura asked. Jack nodded yes. She sat on the other side of the sofa, leaving a respectful space between them. They were silent for a few minutes, just listening to the rain. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled with conversation. But there was something in the air, something unsaid, something that needed to come out. Jack took a deep breath and stood up. He went to an old piece of furniture in the corner of the room, opened a drawer, and took something out. He returned to the sofa, holding an old photo between his fingers. "I want to show you something." Laura looked at him, curious. Jack handed her the photo. She took it carefully, as she always did with things that seemed important. It was the same photo he had shown her weeks ago, the woman with a tired face, but a sweet smile, the simple dress, the small house in the background. Her name was Margaret. She raised me alone. She went hungry so that I could study. Laura looked at the photo attentively. She saw the woman's eyes. She saw the exhaustion there, but also the strength, the determination. She must have been an incredible woman. She was... Jack looked at the photo too, over Laura's shoulder. "And when I look at you, I see the same strength." Laura looked up, surprised. "Jack, it's true. The way you take care of Sophie, the way you work without complaining, the way you keep standing even after everything, it's the same thing." Laura felt her chest tighten. She didn't know what to say. Jack took the photo back and stared at it for a few seconds. Then he put it in his shirt pocket close to his heart. "I was poor once too, Laura," she blinked. Processing. "You... me. We lived in a tiny apartment, 2 rooms, no heating in the winter. My mother sewed until late at night to pay the bills. I remember waking up cold and her covering me with her coat. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. I remember being hungry. I remember going to school and pretending I had eaten at home. I remember seeing other kids with full lunchboxes and feeling ashamed." Laura listened in silence, seeing a side of him she had never seen before. "I know what it's like to be afraid of not having enough. I know what it's like to go to sleep, not knowing if there will be food the next day. I know what it's like to wear patched clothes and hope no one notices. I know, Laura, because I lived it." He paused, looking at the rain that continued to fall heavily outside. "And that's why I understand you. I understand the shame of asking for help. I understand the pride of wanting to do everything on your own. I understand the guilt of not being able to give your child more." Laura felt the tears well up, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of someone who was finally seen, of someone who was finally understood. "But the difference between me and you," Jack continued, "is that I got lucky. I got a scholarship. I got into a good university. I managed to build a career. But my mother didn't have time to see any of it. She died before..." He turned to Laura, and for the first time, she saw tears in his eyes too. "And I was never able to repay her. I was never able to give her what she deserved. I was never able to make her stop working. I was never able to take that tired look off her face." Laura swallowed hard. "But now I can do things differently. Now I have the chance to help someone who is in the same situation she was. Someone who deserves it." He took Laura's hands, carefully, as if he were holding something fragile. "I promise that you will want for nothing. I will take care of you. I will do whatever it takes for you to have the best." Laura broke down. She couldn't hold it in anymore. She covered her face with her hands and cried. She cried out everything she had held in for years. She cried out the fear. She cried out the exhaustion. She cried out the loneliness. She cried out the shame. And she also cried out of relief. Jack pulled her into a hug, a tight hug, the kind that says everything without needing words. Laura buried her face in his shoulder and let the tears fall. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to thank me. Just let me do this. Let me take care of you." Laura nodded, still crying. Jack held her tighter, as if he wanted to protect her from everything, from all the fear, from all the pain, from everything she had been through. And there, in that dimly lit room with the rain falling outside, something changed. It was no longer just about gratitude. It was no longer just about help. It was no longer just about charity. It was about connection, about understanding, about 2 people who came from the same dark place and could now together walk towards the light. The emotional inheritance that Margaret had left her son was being transformed into something concrete, into action, into care. into presence. Jack couldn't change the past. He couldn't bring his mother back. He couldn't repay everything she did for him, but he could honor her memory. He could be for Laura and Sophie what he wished someone had been for his mother. And that, finally, gave meaning to everything. When the tears stopped, Laura pulled away a little, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "You never have to be sorry. Ever." She gave a faint smile. "You're a very special person, Jack. I don't know what I did to deserve to meet you. I think it's the other way around. You and Sophie brought life to this house. You brought life to me." Laura looked around at the living room that was once empty and now had Sophie's drawings on the wall, at the kitchen that now smelled of coffee every morning, at the house that had transformed into a home. "We helped each other, then—" "Yeah, I think so." They stayed there for a few more minutes, in silence, listening to the rain. But it was a different silence now. It was a full silence, full of promises, full of hope, full of something new that was being born between them. And when Laura finally went to sleep, she went up the stairs with a lighter heart than she had had in years. Because for the first time, she wasn't alone. It wasn't just her and Sophie against the world. There was someone by their side, someone who understood, someone who cared, and that changed everything. The next morning, Jack woke up with a single idea in his head. He had a quick breakfast, waited for Laura to go out to the yard with Sophie, and locked himself in his office. He picked up his phone and dialed the number he had written down weeks ago. 3 rings, 4. Westfield Elementary. "Good morning." "Good morning. I'd like to speak with the principal, please. May I ask what this is regarding?" "It's about an enrollment." There was a pause on the other end. "1 moment, please." Jack waited, tapping his fingers on the desk. His heart was beating faster than it should. It wasn't nervousness. It was anticipation. It was the feeling of doing something that really mattered. "This is Principal Wilson. How can I help you?" "Good morning, Principal. My name is Jack Harrison. I need a spot for a girl named Sophie Bennett. Sophie Bennett." The principal seemed to be writing it down. "How old is she?" 6 years old, just turned. She's been out of school for a few months, but she's smart, curious, a fast learner." "I see. And are you the father?" Jack hesitated for a second. "I'm responsible for her. Her mother works for me. They're living in my house." "I understand. Well, we have openings in the 1st grade. We would need documentation, a birth certificate, proof of residence. I'll provide everything. When can she start? If the documentation is in order, she can start on Monday." Jack felt a sense of relief. He closed his eyes for a second, grateful. "Perfect. Thank you so much, Principal." "You're welcome. We'll be expecting Sophie." He hung up and stared at his phone. He had done it. It was settled. Now all he had to do was tell Laura. Later, in the late afternoon, Laura was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Jack appeared at the door. He had that look of someone holding back a surprise. "Laura, can I talk to you?" She turned, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Of course, is something wrong?" "Something happened. But it's a good thing." He came in and leaned against the counter. Laura waited, curious, her heart racing. "I called a school today, Westfield. It's a good school near here." Laura frowned. "A school? For Sophie?" Her face changed. Her eyes widened. "Jack, it's all taken care of. She can start on Monday. I already spoke with the principal. I just need to bring her documents." Laura stood there, processing. Her chest tightened. The tears came before the words. "Jack, I have no words. You don't need any. Just promise me you'll let her dream." The tears fell freely. Laura covered her mouth, trying to hold back a sob, but she couldn't. You didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to." Laura took a step forward and hugged him tightly, her arms around him, her face buried in his chest. Jack was surprised for a second, but then he returned the hug, holding her carefully. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving this back to her. She deserves it, Laura, and so do you." They stayed like that for a few seconds, until Laura pulled away, wiping her face. "Should I tell her?" You can wait until tomorrow. It'll be a better surprise, Laura agreed, still processing. She went back to the stove, but stopped and looked at him. Jack, I'll never be able to thank you enough. You don't have to. Just keep taking care of her. That's enough. That night after dinner, Sophie was already asleep. Laura and Jack stayed in the living room, talking softly so as not to wake her. Do you know what tomorrow is? Laura asked, stirring her cup of tea. No. What? Her birthday. Jack looked up, surprised. Tomorrow? Yes. 6 years old. Laura sighed. I wanted to make a simple little cake. Nothing too elaborate, just something so she knows we remembered. Jack was quiet, but a discreet smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Laura took a sip of her tea. Sometimes I think about everything she's already been through, everything she's missed out on. You gave her what matters: love, presence, security. The rest is just details. Laura felt her eyes burn. Thank you for saying that. She stood up. I'm going to bed. I'll wake up early tomorrow to prepare everything. Good night, Laura. Good night, Jack. She went upstairs. Jack stayed there, alone, looking at the stairs, his mind buzzing with ideas. Tomorrow wasn't going to be just an ordinary day, it was going to be special. The next morning, Laura woke up with the sun streaming through the window. She got up slowly so as not to wake Sophie and went down to the kitchen. The house was quiet. She got the ingredients: flour, sugar, eggs, butter, and started preparing the cake. Nothing elaborate, just a simple vanilla cake. While she mixed the batter, she hummed softly. Her heart was light. Sophie was going back to school. Sophie would have friends again. She put the batter in to bake and started tidying up the kitchen. That's when she heard the front door open and close. She frowned. Had Jack already left? She went back to the kitchen and waited for the cake to be ready. The sweet smell filled the house. Half an hour later, she took the cake out of the oven. Perfect, golden, fragrant, soft. She was heading to the pantry when she heard the door open again. Footsteps. More than one person, it seemed. Laura went back to the kitchen and stopped at the door, completely stunned. The table was transformed. Flowers from the garden in a small vase in the center, 3 set plates, 3 glasses, colorful folded napkins, and balloons. Yellow and pink balloons tied to the chairs, swaying gently. In the center of the table, a small gift with a pink bow. What? Laura covered her mouth with her hand. Sophie came running from the living room, still in her pajamas, her blonde hair messy, her eyes wide. Mommy, look, there are balloons. She ran to the table, touching the balloons carefully, as if they were magic. She pulled one and giggled. Jack appeared at the door with a simple smile. He was wearing jeans and a light-colored shirt, his sleeves rolled up. Good morning, birthday girl. Sophie let go of the balloon and ran to him, hugging his legs. Thank you, Jack. He knelt and ruffled her hair. Happy birthday, Sophie. Laura was still standing there, looking at everything. She looked at Jack, tears streaming down her face. Jack, did you do all this by yourself? He shrugged, as if it were no big deal. It needed a special touch. Every child deserves a party, even if it's just with the ones they love. Laura felt her legs weaken. The tears fell non-stop. Jack approached, his eyes gentle. I just wanted to give her what my mother could never give me. A light, happy, fearless day. Laura couldn't speak. Her throat was tight. She just nodded, wiping her tears. Sophie was exploring the table. She saw the gift. Is this for me? It is, Jack said. You can open it. She took the gift, sat on the floor and started tearing the paper. She tore it carefully until she revealed a box. She opened it. Inside, a rag doll, handmade, soft fabric, blonde yarn hair falling over her shoulders, a colorful dress with lace, and on the chest of the dress, embroidered in red thread, Sophie. Her eyes widened. She's beautiful. She picked up the doll carefully and hugged it tightly. She squeezed it against her chest. "Thank you, Jack, thank you so much." Jack knelt, getting down to her level. "You're welcome, Sophie. She's yours now. Take good care of her." "I will. I'll give her a name." "What name?" Sophie thought for a second. "Hope." Laura and Jack exchanged a look. The name wasn't a coincidence. It was perfect. "Hope is a beautiful name," Laura said, her voice cracking. Sophie stood up and hugged her mother, still holding the doll. "Thank you, Mommy. This is the best birthday ever." Laura hugged her daughter tightly, kissing the top of her head. She looked at Jack over Sophie's shoulder and mouthed the words, "Thank you." Jack just smiled. After Sophie had calmed down and gone to play in the living room, Laura took the cake and put 6 little candles on it. She lit them one by one. "Sophie, come here. Time for cake." The girl came running, holding both dolls now. She sat in her chair, her eyes shining with the light of the candles. Laura and Jack stood, one on each side of her. "Everyone has to make a wish," Sophie announced, seriously. "Then you start, birthday girl," Jack said. Sophie looked at the candles. She closed her eyes tightly, clasped her hands, and was silent for a few seconds. Laura and Jack waited. Then she opened her eyes and blew out the candles. They all went out. "What did you wish for?" Laura asked. Sophie looked at her mother, then at Jack, and smiled. "Thank you for giving me a family." The silence was profound. Laura covered her mouth, the tears returning with force. Jack felt his chest tighten violently. He was speechless. Discreetly, he took Laura's hand. She squeezed it back, tightly. There, in that simple kitchen, with colorful balloons and a homemade cake, the 3 of them understood without needing to speak. They were a family, for real. The day passed quickly. They ate cake. Sophie played with her dolls all day, creating elaborate stories where Hope and the old doll were best friends who went on adventures. Laura and Jack cleaned the kitchen together. He washed, she dried. A silent dance that was already a routine. When the sun began to set, painting the sky gold, orange, and pink, the 3 of them went out to the porch. Sophie sat on the wooden floor, making the dolls talk. She invented voices, laughed to herself, completely immersed in the world of her imagination. Laura and Jack sat in the wooden chairs, side by side. The sky was a spectacle. The colors blended together like in a painting. The trees swayed in the wind. The air was fresh, but not cold. Laura looked at Sophie, at the way she laughed, how light she was, how complete she was. And then, without much thought, without asking for permission, she rested her head on Jack's shoulder. He tensed for a second, surprised, but then he relaxed. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. They stayed like that, in silence, watching the sun go down slowly, watching Sophie play, watching life happen in a simple but complete way. Not a single word was spoken, but everything was said. Love didn't need to be spoken. It didn't need to be declared with beautiful words or impossible promises. It was there, in the presence, in the care, in the way Jack had woken up early to decorate the table, in the way Laura rested her head on his shoulder with confidence, in the way Sophie naturally included them in her games, her drawings, her stories. The simple life was now complete, and they, finally, were a family. A family that hadn't started by blood, but by heart. A family that had chosen to be together. And that, in the end, was all that really mattered.